Reed Biltmore lay on a narrow prison bunk, staring at the ceiling of his cell. The gray concrete above his head seemed endless, like the 8 months he had already spent behind bars. 35 years of his life, and here he was, in a Virginia State Correctional Facility, serving time for a crime he did not commit. The sounds of prison surrounded him on all sides, the barking of guards, the clanging of iron doors, the muffled voices of inmates in neighboring cells. But Reed had grown accustomed to this background noise. It had become part of his new reality. His memory kept taking him back to that December morning when everything went wrong. Reed had been a taxi driver for 7 years and knew every street in Richmond like the back of his hand. It wasn't an easy job. He had to work 12 hours a day to make ends meet, but he didn't complain. He had a roof over his head, a wife he loved, and a small but steady income. That morning, he stopped at the gas station on Broadway, where he often stopped between fares. It was convenient, right on his usual route, not far from downtown, where he got the most calls. He bought coffee, cigarettes, and sometimes something to eat there. The cashier was a young guy named Jason, a white guy about 22 years old, thin, with perpetually tousled hair. They had known each other for about 2 years, sometimes exchanging a few words about the weather or the latest news. Reed remembered that day clearly. It was around 10 in the morning. He had just dropped off a passenger in the business district and decided to take a break. He parked near the gas station and went into the store. Jason was standing behind the register, looking as usual, a little sleepy but friendly. Reed took a large coffee, added cream and sugar, and walked over to the cigarette counter. "How's it going, Jason?" he asked, placing his coffee on the counter and pointing to his usual brand of cigarettes. "Everything's fine, Mr. Blythemore. Just working away. The usual?" Reed nodded. Jason took the pack of cigarettes and rang it up on the cash register. Reed clearly remembered taking a $20 bill out of his shirt pocket. He always kept small bills there for quick payments. The total came to $8.70. Jason opened the cash register and gave him his change, a $10 bill and $1.30 in change. Nothing unusual, just a normal morning on a normal day. Reed didn't even notice that the cash register sounded strange when Jason rang up the purchase. Maybe a little longer than usual, but he didn't think anything of it. He said goodbye to the clerk, got out to his car, finished his coffee, and drove on to work. The day went by as usual. Reed made 8 more trips and earned about $120, not bad for a weekday. He came home in the evening, had dinner with Hannah, and watched the news on TV. His wife was in a good mood, talking about work and a new colleague who had recently started at their supermarket. Nothing foreshadowed trouble. 3 days later, the cops came to his house. Reed was just getting ready for work, finishing his morning coffee in the kitchen, when the doorbell rang. Hannah was still asleep. Her shift at the supermarket didn't start until noon. Reed opened the door and saw 2 plainclothes detectives, a tall, middle-aged white man and a young black woman. "Reed Blythemore?" asked the senior detective, showing his badge. "Detective Miller, Richmond Police Department. This is Detective Wilson. We need to talk to you." Reed's heart skipped a beat, but he tried to remain calm. Maybe he was being called as a witness in some case. Sometimes taxi drivers became unwitting witnesses to crimes. "What's this about?" he asked, letting the police officers into the house. "You're accused of armed robbery at a gas station on Broadway," Detective Wilson said. "The incident occurred the day before yesterday morning." Reed was taken aback. The day before yesterday? But the day before yesterday, he had been at that gas station buying coffee and cigarettes, as usual. "There must be some mistake," he said. "I bought coffee there the day before yesterday morning, but I didn't rob anyone." "We have a witness statement." Reed was arrested at his home. He was handcuffed, read his rights, and taken to the station under the gaze of his neighbors. Hannah woke up from the noise, ran out onto the porch in her bathrobe, crying and screaming that it was some kind of mistake. At the station, Reed was read the charges again. They said he had forced the cashier to give him the money. "That's not what happened," Reed insisted. "I was just buying coffee and cigarettes. He gave me my change." $400 in change? Detective Miller asked with a smirk. After a $9 purchase? Jason was questioned separately. He said that Reed had threatened him, forced him to give him the money from the cash register, and promised to come back and get him. He said he knew where I lived, Jason told the detectives. That if I told anyone, I'd regret it. I was scared, so I didn't call the police right away. Reed couldn't believe what he was hearing. He had never threatened Jason, never even raised his voice to him. They were barely acquainted, just a salesman and a customer who saw each other a couple of times a week. The court-appointed lawyer turned out to be useless, an elderly man with a worn briefcase and an indifferent look. Michael Harris, as he was called, clearly had no desire to look into the case. He glanced through the files, had only 2 conversations with Reed, and advised him to plead guilty in exchange for a reduced sentence. "Listen, they have a witness statement," Harris said, leafing through the documents. "Your chances of acquittal are minimal. You'd better make a deal with the prosecution." "But I'm innocent," Reed insisted. "I didn't rob that gas station." "Everyone says that," the lawyer replied indifferently. "But the facts are against you." Reed refused to admit to something he hadn't done. He believed in justice, believed that the truth would come out sooner or later. In the end, he was sentenced to 3 years for armed robbery, even though he didn't have a weapon on him. Jason claimed that Reed had threatened him with his hand in his jacket pocket, as if he had a gun. Reed still couldn't understand how it had all happened, or why. It was as if someone had deliberately forced or bribed the cashier to testify against him. "Thinking about that day again?" came a hoarse voice from the next bunk. Reed turned his head. His cellmate, Cody Norridge, was sitting on his bed, leafing through a worn magazine. Cody was 42 years old and had spent most of his life in and out of prison. Fraud, forgery, theft. His record was impressive. He was a tall, wiry man with graying temples and intelligent eyes. Despite his criminal past, Cody turned out to be a decent guy and even reminded Reed of the older brother he never had. "I can't get it out of my head," Reed admitted. "I keep trying to figure out how I ended up in this situation." Cody put down the magazine and looked closely at his cellmate. Over the past few months, he had gotten to know Reed well and seen how he was suffering from the injustice. Most prisoners sooner or later admitted their guilt, at least to themselves. But Reed still insisted he was innocent, and Cody believed him. "Have you thought about the possibility that you were set up?" he asked. "Things like this don't happen by accident, bro. Someone had a motive to get you locked up." Reed had considered this many times, but each time he dismissed it. Who would want to frame an ordinary taxi driver? He had no enemies, no one owed him any money, and he didn't have any conflicts with criminals. He lived a quiet life, worked honestly, and didn't bother anyone. "But who would want that?" he asked. "I'm just an ordinary person. I don't have any enemies." "No enemies, but what about people who don't like you?" Cody leaned forward. "Maybe someone wanted to get rid of you for personal reasons. Your wife, for example." At the mention of Hannah, Reed's heart sank. There was one thing that had been bothering him for several months before his arrest. His wife had started acting strangely. Hannah had always been outgoing and open. They had met 5 years ago in a cafe where she was working as a waitress. A beautiful girl with lively eyes and an infectious laugh, Reed had fallen in love with her at first sight. The first years of their marriage were happy. Hannah got a job as a cashier at a supermarket. The pay was modest but stable. Reed worked as a taxi driver, and they rented a small apartment together in a less prestigious neighborhood. They were always short on money, but they were happy with each other and made plans for the future. But about 6 months before her arrest, something changed. Hannah became secretive and withdrawn. She came home late from work saying she was delayed at the supermarket. Inventory, stock-taking, or unscheduled inspections. But when Reed stopped by to give her a ride home one day, her co-workers said she had left an hour ago. "Where were you?" he asked when he finally got through to her. "I stopped by a friend's house on my way home," Hannah replied. "Do I have to report my every move?" Her tone was unusually sharp, almost aggressive. Hannah had never spoken to him like that before. His wife's phone was constantly running out of battery or left at home when she went out. Hannah had always carried her phone with her before, and they texted each other constantly throughout the day. Now she could disappear for hours without contacting him. Hannah started showering more often, especially after coming home and buying new underwear, even though she had never paid much attention to it before. She started wearing new perfume and using new cosmetics. When asked about her purchases, she gave evasive answers. There was a sale, or a friend recommended it. Everything changed in bed, too. Hannah became cold and distant. She refused intimacy under various pretexts. She was tired, had a headache, was in a bad mood. And when she did agree, she behaved mechanically, without her former passion. Reed began to suspect that she was having an affair. He tried to follow his wife several times, but she was careful. She left the house at different times, changed her routes, and always looked around. Once he saw her talking to a tall, dark-skinned guy in a warehouse worker's uniform near the supermarket. The man clearly liked her. Hannah laughed, touched his hand, stood too close to him. Their behavior left no doubt that there was something going on between them. When Reed asked his wife about this man, she said he was just an acquaintance who sometimes shopped at their store. Tyrone, I think that's his name. He works at a warehouse nearby. Nice guy. Do you talk to him often? Reed asked. Sometimes, Hannah shrugged. Why? It just seemed like you were very close for just acquaintances. Are you jealous? His wife laughed, but it sounded unnatural. Reed, he's just a customer. We only say hello. But Reed had seen them with his own eyes. The way they stood, the way they looked at each other, the way they touched. It wasn't just an acquaintance. He wanted to talk to Hannah seriously, to sort things out, but he kept putting off the conversation. He was afraid to hear the truth. And then the arrest happened, and there was no time left to sort out their personal relationship. Tell me about your wife, Cody suggested, interrupting Reed's thoughts. How did she react to your arrest? Reed thought for a moment. Hannah was, of course, shocked when he was arrested. She cried and said it was some kind of mistake, that he would never steal. She hired a lawyer with her last money, although he turned out to be useless. She came to every court hearing and supported him. She seemed to support me, Reed replied slowly, but sometimes I feel like she wasn't completely honest with me. Hannah visited him regularly during the first months of his imprisonment. She brought him packages, told him the news, and comforted him. But there was something insincere about her behavior. Reed couldn't put his finger on it, but he felt it intuitively. Maybe it was because she had accepted his fate too quickly, or because she seemed distant during their visits, as if her mind was elsewhere. Reed noticed how she glanced at her watch, how nervous she became when the date was coming to an end, not because she didn't want to leave, but because she was in a hurry to get somewhere. In the last 2 months, Hannah had been coming less and less. She blamed work, transportation problems, feeling unwell. She promised to come next week but didn't show up. She didn't answer his letters and rarely picked up the phone when he called from prison. What if she knew more than she was saying? Cody leaned forward, lowering his voice. Listen, I've seen a lot of setups in my life. Usually, the people behind them are people who know the victim well. They know their habits, their daily routine, their weaknesses. Reed felt uneasy. He had never considered Hannah a possible conspirator against him. She was his wife. They had been married for 5 years. Sure, their relationship wasn't perfect. What relationship is? But he loved her and thought she loved him. Although now, analyzing the last few months before the arrest, Reed was beginning to notice strange coincidences. Hannah knew his routes exactly, knew that he regularly stopped at that gas station. She knew what time he usually was there. She could have passed this information on to someone else. But why would she do that? Reed asked. We were married, living together. Maybe that's exactly why, Cody suggested. Maybe she wanted to get rid of you, but divorce wasn't an option. Alimony, division of property, all those problems. This way, you're behind bars and she's free. The thought was terrible, but logical. If Hannah really had an affair with that guy Tyrone, then Reed was a hindrance to their relationship. Divorce in their financial situation would mean long court battles, dividing debts rather than property. And if Reed went to prison, Hannah would be free without any problems. But how could she have arranged it? Reed wondered aloud. Maybe they just took advantage of the opportunity. You bought coffee and cigarettes there regularly. All they had to do was wait for the right moment and persuade the cashier to change his testimony. Reed remembered Jason's strange behavior during that ill-fated visit. The guy really did look nervous, constantly looking around as if he was waiting for someone. And the cash register sounded unusual. Maybe Jason was doing some extra transactions? What if someone paid Jason to give false testimony, he suggested. Promised him money to accuse me of robbery? Very possible, Cody agreed. The $400 from the cash register could have been payment for the service. Jason took the money and reported the robbery. The more Reed thought about it, the more plausible this version seemed. Jason was a young guy, probably in need of money. $400 was a lot of money for him. And accusing a regular customer of robbery wasn't that difficult, especially if there was a video recording of a routine purchase that could be interpreted in different ways. Reed's thoughts were interrupted by the sound of a cell door opening. Guard Johnson appeared in the doorway, a short, stocky man in his 50s with a gray mustache and a stern gaze. Biltmore, get your things. You're being transferred to another job. Reed rose from his bunk in surprise. For the past 3 months, he had been working in the prison warehouse, unloading goods and sorting food for the prison canteen. The work was hard. He had to carry sacks of flour and groats and boxes of canned food. But he didn't complain. Physical labor helped him take his mind off his problems. Where am I being transferred to? He asked. To the library. They need a librarian's assistant. You can read, can't you? Johnson asked with a smirk. Reed nodded. He had a high school education and had always loved to read, although in recent years he had had little time for books. Working as a taxi driver took a lot of energy, and when he got home, he just wanted to relax in front of the TV. Good for you, Cody remarked when the guard had left. The library is a quiet place. You can think and sort out your problems there. Reed nodded in agreement, but his mind was preoccupied with other things. The transfer to lighter work seemed suspicious. Usually, such positions were given to prisoners with good behavior after a long stay in the institution. Reed had only served 8 months and didn't stand out among the others. That evening, lying in the dark and listening to Cody's steady breathing, Reed thought again about his cellmate's words. Maybe he was right. Maybe he really had been framed. But if so, who and why? The thought that Hannah might have been involved in this didn't give him any peace. On the one hand, he had no proof of her guilt. On the other hand, there were too many strange coincidences and suspicious moments. He remembered the conversation with the stranger outside the supermarket. The tall guy in work clothes didn't look like a regular shopper. He was too familiar with Hannah, and she was too happy to see him. Maybe that was the man she was cheating on her husband with, and maybe he was the one who helped her get rid of Reed. 2 weeks had passed since Reed started working in the prison library. The job turned out to be quiet and uneventful. He helped other inmates find the books they needed, kept things tidy, and cataloged new arrivals. The librarian, an elderly woman named Mrs. Carter, was kind to him and even allowed him to read in his spare time. But in recent days, Reed hadn't been feeling very well. At first, it was just fatigue. He chalked it up to stress and the prison environment. Then the headaches started, and they didn't go away even after he slept. He lost his appetite almost completely. Food seemed tasteless. He was plagued by insomnia at night, and often woke up in a cold sweat. You don't look well, Cody remarked in the morning as they were getting ready for breakfast. Maybe you should see a doctor? Reed looked at himself in the small mirror above the sink. He did look sickly. His face was gaunt, with dark circles under his eyes and pale skin. He had lost a lot of weight over the past week, and his clothes hung loosely on him. I'm probably just not used to prison life yet, he dismissed. It'll pass. But his condition did not improve. At work in the library, Reed often felt weak and had to sit down to avoid falling. Mrs. Carter asked him several times with concern how he was feeling. He didn't have a fever, but his whole body ached as if he had the flu. A few days later, he started having diarrhea. Reed spent half the night in the bathroom, feeling disgusting. In the morning, he struggled to get out of bed. His head was spinning and his vision was blurry. That's it, enough, Cody said firmly. You're going to the infirmary? I don't want you to die in front of me. Reed didn't argue. He knew something serious was happening to him. He asked the guard for permission to see a doctor and was sent to the prison infirmary. The infirmary was located in a separate wing of the prison. It consisted of several small rooms, a treatment room, and an isolation ward for sick prisoners. Everything looked rather modest, but clean and tidy. Reed registered with the nurse, a young black woman with a tired face, and waited to be seen. Half an hour later, he was invited to see the doctor. Dr. Patricia Evans was a woman of about 45, of medium height, with short graying hair and attentive eyes behind thin-rimmed glasses. She had been working in prison medicine for over 10 years and had seen it all. "Have a seat, Mr. Blythemore," she said, studying his chart. "What are you complaining about?" Reed described his symptoms: fatigue, headaches, loss of appetite, upset stomach. Dr. Evans listened attentively, asking clarifying questions from time to time. "When did the symptoms start?" "About 2 weeks ago. At first, I didn't pay much attention to it. I thought it was stress." "Have you had any similar problems before?" "No, never. I was practically never sick before I went to prison." Dr. Evans examined him, taking his blood pressure, listening to his lungs and heart, and checking his lymph nodes. Several nodes in his neck were enlarged, which caused the doctor concern. "Mr. Blitmore, I need to take some blood for testing," she said. "The symptoms could indicate various illnesses. We need to run some tests." "What do you suspect?" Reed asked. "It's too early to say. We'll wait for the test results." The nurse drew blood from his vein. Dr. Evans said the results would be ready in 3 days and sent Reed back to his cell. She prescribed vitamins and medication for his stomach upset. The next 3 days dragged on agonizingly. Reed tried to work in the library, but it was difficult to concentrate. His thoughts kept returning to his visit to the doctor. What if it was something serious? Cancer? Tuberculosis? Anything was possible in prison. Cody tried to cheer him up, but he was also concerned about his cellmate's condition. Reed continued to lose weight and looked worse and worse. He ate with difficulty and often got up at night to use the toilet. "He probably caught some kind of infection," Cody said. "It's unsanitary here. It's easy to get sick." On the 4th day, Reed was called to the infirmary again. His heart sank when he saw the serious expression on Dr. Evans's face. Doctors usually looked like that when they had bad news. "Have a seat, Mr. Blythemore," she said, pointing to a chair in front of her desk. "I have the results of your tests." Reed sat down, feeling his whole body tense up. His hands were shaking slightly with excitement. "I'm very sorry, but I have some bad news," Dr. Evans began. "Your blood test came back positive for HIV." The words hit Reed like a bolt of lightning. He felt the world around him freeze. HIV? How was that possible? He had never used drugs, never had a tattoo, never had promiscuous sex. Are you sure?" he managed to say. "Maybe it's a mistake?" "We checked twice," Dr. Evans said quietly. "Unfortunately, the result is positive. But this is not a death sentence, Mr. Blythemore. Modern medicine allows people with HIV to live full lives with the right treatment." Reed listened to her explanation as if through a fog. The doctor talked about starting antiretroviral therapy, getting regular tests, and monitoring his health. But all the words seemed distant and unreal. "How did I get infected?" he asked when the doctor finished speaking. "HIV is transmitted in several ways," she explained. "Sexually, through blood, from mother to child. Do you remember any risky situations recently?" Reed tried to remember. No medical procedures, no casual encounters. The only person he had been intimate with was Hannah, his wife. Suddenly, everything fell into place. Hannah's strange behavior in the months before his arrest, the coldness in bed, the reluctance to be intimate, the frequent showers after work, the new lingerie and cosmetics, and the guy he saw with her near the supermarket. If Hannah had been having an affair, and if her lover was HIV positive, she could have contracted the virus from him and then passed it on to her husband. Reed felt rage building inside him. "Mr. Blythemore, can you hear me?" Dr. Evans asked anxiously. "Yes, I'm sorry," Reed snapped out of his trance. "I'm just trying to make sense of it all." "I understand this is shocking, but it's important not to panic. We'll start treatment and you'll get better." The doctor prescribed medication and scheduled a follow-up appointment for a week later. Reed listened to all the instructions, but his mind was elsewhere. Hannah had infected him, his own wife, whom he trusted, whom he loved. The walk back to his cell seemed to take forever. Reed walked as if in a dream, oblivious to his surroundings. Thoughts swirled in his head, each more terrifying than the last. HIV, infidelity, betrayal. "Well?" Cody asked as soon as Reed appeared in the cell. "What did the doctor say?" Reed lay down on his bunk in silence and closed his eyes. Cody knew the news was bad and didn't press him for an answer. He just put his hand on his cellmate's shoulder in a gesture of support. "HIV," Reed said quietly after a few minutes. "I have HIV." "Damn," Cody exhaled. "That's serious, but it's not fatal if you get treatment. Do you know how I got it?" Reed turned to his cellmate. "From my wife. She cheated on me with some guy, got it from him, and then gave it to me." Cody frowned. During their months together in prison, he had gotten to know Reed well, knew his story, and had seen how he suffered from the injustice of his situation. And now this. "Are you sure?" he asked cautiously. "Absolutely. I haven't had any other partners. I don't use drugs, only her." Reed told his cellmate about his suspicions of his wife's infidelity, about the guy near the supermarket, about Hannah's strange behavior in recent months. Now everything took on a new, sinister meaning. "And she set you up," Cody remarked grimly. "First she infected you, then she made sure you went to prison." "It looks that way," Reed agreed bitterly. "She wanted to get rid of me, and she did." The evening noise began in the neighboring cells as the inmates returned from work and prepared for dinner. But Reed couldn't think about food or any everyday matters. There was only one thought in his head. Hannah had betrayed him in the most despicable way. "What are you going to do?" Cody asked. "I don't know," Reed admitted. "I want to kill her with my own hands. I understand your anger, brother. I'd be furious too if I were you." Their cellmate Bill joined them for dinner. He was serving time for assault. When he heard about Reed's diagnosis, he also flew into a rage. "That bitch!" he cursed. "She infected her husband and got him sent to prison. Creatures like that don't deserve to live." "Calm down, Bill," Cody snapped at him. "We need to think about what to do next, not about our emotions." "What is there to think about? He has to serve his time, get out, and deal with that bitch. Show her what it means to betray her husband." Reed listened to his cellmate's conversation, feeling rage boiling inside him. Yes, he wanted to take revenge on Hannah for everything she had done to him, for cheating on him, for infecting him, for setting him up. But 3 years was a long time. What if she disappeared during that time? Move to another city, marry that guy? "I need to talk to her," Reed decided. "While I'm here, while she thinks I don't know anything." "Why?" Cody asked in surprise. "What are you going to say to her?" "I want to look her in the eyes when I tell her I know the truth. I want to see how she justifies herself. She'll lie to you. Women like her always lie." "Maybe, but I have to do this." The next day, Reed asked the guard for a phone call. According to prison rules, inmates were allowed 1 call per week, lasting no more than 15 minutes. Reed had been saving up this privilege for a month, not calling Hannah since she stopped coming to visit regularly. Permission was granted the next day. Reed walked into the telephone room, a small room with several booths. The guard led him to one of them and set the timer for 15 minutes. Reed dialed his home number. The rings seemed endless. Finally, someone picked up. "Hello?" Hannah's familiar voice answered. "It's me," Reed said. "Reed!" His wife's voice sounded surprised and happy. "How are you? It's been a long time since you called." "I'm fine. How are you?" "I'm working. I miss you. When can we see each other?" Reed gripped the phone tighter. How easily she lied, how natural her voice sounded, as if she really missed her husband, sitting in prison for a crime he didn't commit. "Hannah, I need to talk to you," he said. "I need to talk seriously." "About what?" Her voice sounded wary. "Not on the phone. Come see me this Saturday." "I can't on Saturday. I have to work." "Switch shifts with someone," Reed interrupted her. "This is important, Hannah. Very important." There was a pause. Reed could hear his wife breathing into the phone, thinking about what he had said. "Okay," she finally said. "I'll come on Saturday. What's wrong, Reed? You're scaring me." "You'll find out on Saturday. But, goodbye, Hannah." Reed hung up and looked at the guard. The conversation had lasted only 3 minutes, but that was enough. Hannah would arrive on Saturday, and then he would tell her everything he thought about her and what she had done. "Are you done?" the guard asked. "Yes," Reed nodded. "I'm done." The walk back to his cell seemed shorter than usual. Reed felt a strange calmness he hadn't felt in a long time. He had finally done something. He had finally taken action instead of just suffering from injustice. "Well?" Cody asked when Reed returned to his cell. "We agreed on Saturday," he replied briefly. "And what are you going to tell her?" "The truth. The whole truth about what a monster she is." Cody nodded. He understood his cellmate's state of mind, having once experienced the betrayal of someone close to him. Sometimes you had to get it off your chest, say everything to someone's face, so you could move on with your life. "Just keep yourself under control," he advised. "Don't do anything stupid." "I won't," Reed promised. But inside, he was seething with rage that he could barely contain. Hannah had betrayed him so cruelly, so despicably, that a simple explanation seemed insufficient punishment. She deserved more. Saturday came agonizingly slowly. Reed hardly slept on Friday, tossing and turning in his bunk, going over the upcoming conversation with his wife in his head. He had been gloomy and silent all day, which did not escape Cody's attention. "Are you sure you want to do this?" his cellmate asked on Saturday morning as they ate breakfast in the common room. "I'm sure," Reed replied curtly, not touching his oatmeal. "Just remember, you're in prison. You're being watched. Don't do anything you'll regret." Reed nodded, but Cody saw a cold determination in his eyes that worried him. During their time together, he had gotten to know his cellmate well. Reed was a calm and even-tempered man, but what had happened in the last few days had changed him. After learning about his diagnosis and realizing the extent of his wife's betrayal, he had become a different person, harsh and embittered. At 10 in the morning, Guard Johnson came for Reed. Visits took place in a special wing of the prison, a long room divided into separate booths by glass partitions. Each cubicle was equipped with a table, 2 chairs, and a telephone handset for communication through the glass. Reed walked to the designated cubicle, number 7, and sat down on a metal chair. His hands trembled slightly with excitement, but he quickly regained his composure. Today, he would learn the whole truth. Today, Hannah would answer for everything she had done. 10 minutes later, his wife entered the visitor's booth. Reed felt his heart ache at the sight of her familiar face. Hannah looked well, even better than she had in the last months of their life together. Her hair was neatly styled, and she was wearing a new dress that Reed hadn't seen before. Her makeup and manicure suggested that life without her husband was going well. "Reed!" Hannah sat down in the chair opposite him and picked up the phone. "How are you? You look thin." "I was sick," he replied dryly, also picking up the receiver. "But everything's fine now. What happened to you?" Concern sounded in her voice, but Reed no longer believed a word she said. "I'll tell you later. First, I want to talk to you about something else." Hannah looked closely at her husband. Something in his tone, in his expression, made her wary. In 5 years of marriage, she had gotten to know his character well, and now she sensed that something was wrong. "What do you want to talk about?" she asked cautiously. "About Tyrone," Reed said calmly. Hannah's face instantly paled. She tried to remain calm, but Reed saw her hands tremble and her eyes widen. "I don't know who you're talking about," she said. "Of course you do. The tall guy who works as a mover. The one I saw with you near the supermarket. Your lover." "Reed, you're confusing something." "I'm not confusing anything." His voice grew louder, and the guard on duty in the visiting room turned his attention to them. Reed made an effort to calm down. "I know everything, Hannah. I know about your affair. I know how you cheated on me in the months before you were arrested." Hannah was silent, not knowing what to say. Her beautiful face was contorted with fear and confusion. "But that's not all," Reed continued. "Do you want to know what I've been sick with? HIV, Hannah? I have HIV? Do you understand what that means?" "No," she gasped. "That's impossible. It's very possible. You caught it from your Tyrone, and then you gave it to me. My own wife gave me a deadly disease." Hannah covered her face with her hands. Her shoulders shook with sobs, but Reed felt no pity for her. On the contrary, her tears only intensified his rage. "But that's not all," he said harshly. "The interesting part is how I ended up in prison, how I was framed for a robbery I didn't commit. Read, please." "Shut up and listen. You and your Tyrone bribed Jason at the gas station. You gave him money to accuse me of robbery, right?" Hannah lifted her tear-stained face and looked at her husband. In her eyes, he saw not only fear, but something else. Relief? Freedom from the weight of the lie? "How do you know?" she asked quietly. "It doesn't matter how. What matters is that it's true. Admit it, Hannah. You're tired of lying." There was a long pause. Hannah stared at the table, unable to bring herself to look up. Finally, she spoke, her voice barely audible. "Yes, it's true." Hearing her confession, Reed felt something inside him break completely. It was one thing to suspect, but quite another to hear it confirmed from his own wife's lips. "Tell me everything," he demanded. "From the very beginning." Hannah wiped away her tears and began to tell him everything. Her voice was monotonous, as if she were reading from a script. "I met Tyrone 6 months ago. He really does work as a delivery man, sometimes bringing goods to our supermarket. At first we just talked. He was very charming and attentive. I fell in love with him." "Go on," Reed said coldly. "We started dating. I knew I was doing something wrong, but I couldn't stop. Tyrone was so different. He made me feel alive, wanted. Did you know about the HIV?" "No," Hannah exclaimed. "I swear I didn't know." "Tyrone only told me about it a month ago. It turned out he'd caught it from an ex-girlfriend, but he'd only found out recently." "And what did you decide to do?" Tyrone suggested. "He said that if you found out about our affair and his illness, you'd kill us both, that we had to come up with something." Reed listened, feeling rage boiling inside him. So not only had they betrayed him, but they also considered him a potential murderer. "And you decided to send me to prison," he stated. "Tyrone knew Jason," Hannah continued. "They went to school together and were friends. Tyrone said Jason would agree to help for money. He had a drug problem and needed cash. How much did you pay him?" $500. Jason was supposed to report the robbery and accuse you. We knew you regularly bought coffee and cigarettes there, so we waited for the right day." "And what exactly did he do that day?" "He took $400 from the cash register and said you stole it. He said you threatened him." Reed shook his head. So it had all been planned down to the last detail. They had ruined his life so they could continue their affair in peace. "And what did you do? Play the loving wife?" "I was really worried," Hannah cried. "I knew I was doing something terrible, but I couldn't stop. Tyrone said that in a couple of years we would confess everything, that it was a mistake, and you would be released." "A couple of years," Reed sneered bitterly. "And in that time I was supposed to die of HIV in prison, right?" "We didn't know you'd get infected," Hannah exclaimed. "Tyrone said the risk was low, that modern medicine—" "Shut up," Reed cut her off. "Just shut up." He looked at his wife, the woman he had once loved more than life itself, and felt nothing but disgust. Hannah had betrayed him in the most despicable way possible. She had cheated on him, infected him with a deadly disease, and sent him to prison for a crime he didn't commit. "Reed, I know I have no right to ask for forgiveness," Hannah said through her tears. "But I still love you. All these months I've been tormented by what I did." "You love me?" Reed asked. "Do you know what love is?" "I do, and I really do love you. Tyrone was like a spell, a madness. But you're real. You're my husband. Your husband is in prison for something he didn't do, dying of a disease you gave him," Reed said coldly. "And you're telling me about love." "What do you want me to do?" Hannah asked. "I'll do anything. I'll tell the police the truth, find a lawyer, prove your innocence." "It's too late." Reed shook his head. "It's too late for all that." He stood up from the table. Hannah looked at him fearfully. "What are you doing?" "What I should have done a long time ago." Hannah also stood up, backing away toward the wall of the cubicle. "Reed, don't do anything stupid. There are security guards here. They can see you." "I don't care," he said. Hannah tried to run out, but he managed to grab her by the shoulders. "Reed, let me go!" she screamed. "You're not a murderer!" "No," he agreed, squeezing his hands around her neck. "I'm not a murderer, but you made me one." Hannah tried to break free, scratching his face and arms, but Reed was stronger. Months of working in the prison warehouse had toughened his muscles. He squeezed her throat tighter, staring into her eyes, which were wide with terror. "Reed!" Guard Johnson burst into the stall with 2 colleagues. "Let her go immediately!" But it was too late. Hannah went limp in her husband's arms, her eyes rolling back. Reed felt the guards grab him, but he didn't resist. He had done what he had to do. "She's dead," one of the guards said after checking Hannah's pulse. Reed was handcuffed and taken away. He didn't resist or even try to explain himself. He just stared at his wife's lifeless body and felt a strange calmness. "Do you realize what you've done?" Johnson asked as he was led out of the visiting room. "Now you're definitely going to get life." "I understand," Reed replied calmly. He was led down a long corridor to solitary confinement, a special block for particularly dangerous prisoners. Reed walked slowly, without rushing. He had nowhere to hurry to. His whole former life had ended the moment his hands tightened around Hannah's neck. The isolation ward was a solitary cell measuring 2 by 3 meters. There was only a bunk bed, a sink, and a toilet. There were no windows, only a small grill in the door. Reed was stripped, searched, given a prison uniform, and locked in the cell. He lay down on the bunk and closed his eyes. Yes, now he would definitely get life imprisonment. Murder in prison, and in front of the guards no less. No lawyer could help him now. But Reed did not regret what he had done. Hannah got what she deserved. She had betrayed him, infected him with a deadly disease, and sent him to prison for a crime he did not commit. And now she was dead, and he would rot in solitary confinement for the rest of his life. He heard footsteps in the corridor, probably investigators coming for him. Reed didn't move from the cot. He had nothing to hide, nothing to regret. He had done what he believed was right.